The last words I heard before the world gave way beneath me were whispered in my ear. "Enjoy your fall, Margaret." The railing snapped, the sunset-painted sky spun, and I felt my body plunge into the abyss of Napa Valley's cliffs. My daughter Emily just stood there, her phone raised, smiling as if she were filming a scene, my death scene. And my son-in-law Ryan. He didn't even flinch. Their plan was simple. Kill me, bury the truth beneath the vines, and inherit the $2.5 billion fortune my late husband left behind. But fate is crueler and kinder than they imagined. Because by the time they returned home that night, convinced they were rid of me forever, I was sitting in my favorite chair, very much alive, with a surprise waiting that would shatter their perfect crime. But before I tell you how I crawled back from the edge of death, let me take you to the Tuesday morning when it all began. A morning so ordinary, I never saw the storm coming. That Tuesday morning felt almost cruel in how peaceful it was. The San Francisco sun cut through my window blinds in soft golden lines, spilling across the hardwood floor of my condo. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room, wrapping around me like a promise that the day would be ordinary. I remember smoothing down the navy scarf at my collar, staring at my reflection in the mirror, whispering to myself, "You're still strong, Margaret. You're still wanted." I wanted so desperately to believe that. My knee still ached from surgery, the scar a sharp reminder that my body was slower now. And with Robert gone, the silence in that condo was a weight I carried every day. What I longed for was simple, a sign that my daughter Emily still saw me as her mother, not just a bank account with a pulse. Then the phone rang. Her voice, bright, rehearsed, poured through the line. "Mom, let's do something special today. Just us. Like real family again." My chest tightened. "Just us. Real family." The words tasted sweet, and I swallowed them whole, ignoring the bitterness at the edges. I didn't question why my daughter suddenly wanted me, after months of cold distance. I didn't ask why her husband Ryan was the one who'd always called before. I only heard what I wanted to hear, that maybe, finally, I wasn't as alone as I feared. I chose my red dress, the one Robert always said made me look like fire against the world. I slipped it on like armor, sprayed my perfume, gardenia and cedarwood, and whispered, "Today will be different." But if I had listened to the small voice at the back of my mind, the one warning me about the tone in Emily's voice, maybe, just maybe, I would have seen the storm that was already gathering. The drive up to Napa was breathtaking. Rolling hills, endless rows of vines, the sky a canvas of cobalt and gold. But beneath the beauty, something gnawed at me, a weight I couldn't shake. The estate came into view like a palace carved into the hillside. Glass walls glimmered in the afternoon light, reflecting the valley below. A place meant for laughter and family dinners. Yet I felt only the chill of a stage set for something else. Emily was already waiting on the terrace. She looked flawless in a black silk blouse, her blonde hair tied back neatly, her smile sharp as broken glass. Beside her, Ryan stood with 2 glasses of Chardonnay. His white shirt open at the collar, the kind of casual that tries too hard. "Mom," Emily said, rushing forward, arms wide. But when she hugged me, her body was stiff, the embrace practiced, like she was performing for invisible cameras. Ryan kissed my cheek, the wine heavy on his breath. "Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect for celebrating." His grip on my shoulder lingered a moment too long, firm where affection should have been gentle. I glanced around. The terrace overlooked the cliffs, the railing gleaming new but thin, almost fragile. The wind carried the scent of oak barrels and salt from the bay far below. For a heartbeat, I imagined what it would feel like to fall. We sat at a long cedar table dressed in white linen. Emily poured me a glass herself, the golden liquid catching the sun. "To family," she said, clinking her glass against mine. Her eyes, however, didn't soften. They measured me like an appraiser with a jewel. I smiled back, forcing warmth into my voice. "To family." But inside unease coiled. I noticed Ryan's phone recording on the table, angled slightly toward me. And when Emily leaned in, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, she whispered low enough that only I could hear, We need to talk about your will, Mom. The wine turned bitter on my tongue. And in that moment, as the sun dipped lower, I realized. This wasn't a celebration. It was an interrogation. The golden light of late afternoon slanted across the terrace, turning the vineyard below into a sea of fire. But up here the air was colder, heavier. I set my glass down, my fingers trembling slightly. My will? I asked, forcing my voice steady. Emily's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. We just worry about you. Probate, trust documents, it can all get so complicated. Ryan leaned forward, filling my glass too quickly, the Chardonnay splashing over the rim. His voice carried that fake warmth people use at funerals. You've been forgetful lately. Doctors say stress can accelerate memory issues at your age. We just want to protect you. My chest tightened. Forgetful. Memory issues. I wanted to laugh, but their faces were deadly serious. That's absurd, I snapped. I remember everything perfectly well. Emily's tone softened, syrupy, as if speaking to a child. Mom, denial is part of it. The surgery, the pain meds. You've been confused. Don't you remember the time you called me 3 times in one day, asking the same question? I did remember. But I remembered more. The grief after Robert's death, the loneliness that gnawed holes in my mind. Slip, not a pattern. Ryan slid his phone closer, the camera now aimed directly at me. Just talk, Margaret, he said softly. We're documenting this. For your safety. My stomach turned. For my safety or for their case. I set the glass down, staring at them, searching for the children I once loved in the faces of these 2 strangers. You're twisting things, I whispered. Emily reached across the table, her hand cold against mine. We're helping you, Mom. You can do this the easy way. Or the hard way. The wind rose, rattling the thin railing behind me. And for the first time I realized, I wasn't just being manipulated. I was being erased. The world slowed to a cruel stillness. Ryan's hand brushed casually against the railing as if testing it. Then his fingers tightened. I heard the faint metallic click, like a lock opening in hell. Emily's voice cut the silence, smooth as silk but sharp as a knife. Mom, maybe it's time you let go of control. And then, without warning, the railing gave way. I stumbled forward, the tablecloth whipping against my arm, the wine glass shattering on stone. For a split second, the terrace tilted beneath me, the vineyard exploding into a blur of green and gold. The wind tore at my hair, the red fabric of my dress billowing like a flame snuffed out mid-breath. My body slammed against jagged stone, pain cracking through me in lightning bolts. I wanted to scream, but only a gasp left my lips as air and sound were ripped away. My knee, the one I'd just had surgery on, twisted brutally. My arms clawed at nothing but empty air. Above, I caught a final glimpse. Emily's face framed by the setting sun, her phone raised, recording. Her expression wasn't shock. It was relief. And Ryan, standing behind her, simply slipped his hands into his pockets. Salt from the ocean below stung my throat as I plummeted, the roar of the waves rising to swallow me whole. So this is how it ends, I thought, every memory flashing. Robert's laughter, Emily's first steps, the quiet mornings I still believed in family. But then another thought pierced the darkness as the rocks rushed toward me. No, not yet. Not like this. The impact came with a bone-shaking thud, the world erupting in pain and blackness. And in that moment between life and death, I understood one thing with brutal clarity. My family had just declared war. Darkness pressed in on me, thick and heavy, like the ocean itself was trying to drag me into its cold lungs. My chest burned, my limbs screamed, and every heartbeat felt like it might be my last. Then headlights. A harsh beam cut through the dusk, bouncing across the jagged rocks below the cliff. A voice, gruff and urgent, broke through the roar of the waves. Hang on. Jesus, Tyler grabbed the rope. Hands, strong, calloused, slid beneath my arms, hauling me up from the edge of the surf. My body was dead weight, drenched, trembling, but those hands refused to let me sink back. I was pulled against a chest that smelled of smoke, sea salt, and gasoline. Through blurred vision I saw him. Ethan Morales. Mid-50s, weathered skin, eyes sharp as stormlight. A man who looked like he'd wrestled fire itself and won. Beside him a teenage boy. His grandson Tyler, wide-eyed, clutching a coil of rope like it was life itself. Ethan's voice cut through the night, steady, commanding. "You're all right, ma'am. Stay with me. Breathe." "That's it, breathe." I gasped, choking seawater, my body shaking so violently I thought my bones might splinter. But I was alive. Alive. Ethan wrapped a heavy firefighter's jacket around me, its weight grounding me against the chaos inside my head. My teeth chattered as I clung to the fabric. My daughter, they pushed me," I managed to whisper, my voice broken glass. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at me. Not disbelief. Not pity. Just quiet understanding. Finally he said, low and certain, "Then we don't tell them you survived." The words sank deeper than the salt water ever could. Somewhere in the valley above, Emily and Ryan were toasting my death. But here on the rocky shore, with two strangers who refused to let me go, a spark of something terrifying and beautiful ignited inside me. Oh. The next thing I remember was the creak of old wooden steps and the smell of ginger broth. Ethan had driven me through winding back roads until the lights of Napa vanished into night. We stopped at a small boarding house tucked between shuttered shops in Chinatown, San Francisco. Its neon sign flickered in tired red. Wong's Guest House. Mrs. Wong, a woman in her 70s with hair like silver threads pinned tight, opened the door without surprise, as if she'd seen ghosts before. She took one look at my soaked dress, my trembling hands, and simply said, "Inside now." Her place was dim, lit by a single paper lantern that painted the walls in strokes of crimson and gold. The air smelled of star anise and old wood. She didn't ask questions. She ladled soup into a chipped porcelain bowl and set it before me. "You'll think clearer on a full stomach." I tried, but my hands shook too hard to hold the spoon steady. Finally, I pushed the bowl away and reached for the small notebook Ethan slid across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Your memory," he said simply. "Before they take it from you." So I wrote. With every line, my chest burned hotter. "Emily, my daughter." She smiled while filming me fall. Ryan loosened the railing. They called it protection. They meant execution. $2.5 billion. Robert's legacy. My life. The ink smeared where my tears fell, but I kept writing. Because if I died tomorrow, someone had to know the truth. When I finished, I closed the notebook and looked up. Ethan watched me, arms crossed, his jaw set like stone. Mrs. Wong cleared the dishes quietly, humming an old tune. For the first time since Robert's funeral, I didn't feel completely alone. But that comfort was brief. Because as the clock ticked past midnight, a thought struck me like ice water. If Emily and Ryan believed I was dead, then somewhere right now, they were already planning what came next. I whispered into the stillness. They tried to bury me. Now I'll make sure they regret not digging deeper. My reflection in the lantern's glow didn't look like a grieving widow anymore. It looked like someone reborn in fire and salt water. Someone ready for war. Morning crept into Mrs. Wong's guest house, pale light seeping through lace curtains. I hadn't slept. My notebook lay open on the table, page after page of jagged handwriting, every word a scar. Ethan returned just after sunrise. He dropped a manila folder onto the table with a heavy thud. "What's this?" asked my voice raw. "Names, documents, things I thought were buried." His tone was grim. "And one name you'll want to remember. Daniel Price." The folder smelled faintly of tobacco and leather, like it had been pulled from an office that thrived in shadows. I flipped it open. Clippings, obituaries, probate filings. All with the same pattern. Wealthy seniors, sudden accidents, families cashing in. The handwriting on the margin of one legal draft made my skin crawl. Sharp, deliberate strokes, the kind of signature designed to intimidate. Daniel Price. Estate attorney. My throat tightened. I'd met him once at a charity gala. Polished, charming, the kind of man who made widows feel safe while studying them like prey. Ethan leaned closer, his finger tapping a line of type. He's not just your daughter's lawyer. He runs what he calls the Estate Acceleration Network. Families come to him when they're tired of waiting for their inheritance. He builds the legal scaffolding. They handle the removal. I stared at the faces in the folder. Women with kind eyes, men with proud postures, all reduced to black and white obituaries. All dead. All tragic accidents. My stomach turned cold. So Emily and Ryan, they're not masterminds. They're pawns. Exactly, Ethan said. Daniel Price gives them the script. He covers their tracks. And he gets a cut of whatever's left behind. Mrs. Wong placed a teapot on the table. Her hands steady but her eyes dark. This man. He's a butcher with a briefcase. The air in the room seemed to thicken. For months, I'd believed the worst betrayal was my daughter's smile as she filmed me falling. But now, staring at the file, I realized my story was just one thread in a web stretching across the country. And every thread ended the same way. Death, inheritance, silence. I closed the folder, my hand trembling not from fear but from rage. They thought they could erase me. They thought I'd just vanish. But now, I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every name in this folder. Outside, the city was waking. Car horns, morning chatter, sunlight bouncing off glass towers. Ordinary life oblivious. But in the dim light of Mrs. Wong's kitchen, war had already begun. The vineyard was dressed for mourning. Rows of black chairs lined the manicured lawn, their shadows stretching long under the late afternoon sun. A mahogany casket sat at the front, draped in white lilies. My photograph, smiling, framed in gold, stared back at the crowd from an easel, as if I'd already been carved into memory. Emily stood beside the casket in a sleek black dress, her hair pinned perfectly, mascara artfully smudged for effect. Ryan wore a tailored suit, his hand on her shoulder like a politician accepting condolences. Their performance was flawless. Grieving children who had lost everything. And the guests believed it. Neighbors, business partners, even old friends dabbed at their eyes, murmuring about my kindness and my tragic accident. I watched from the edge of the vineyard, my red dress blazing against the sea of black. My heart pounded like a war drum. Every step I took forward felt like reclaiming ground stolen from me. The murmurs started softly. A chair scraped. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Emily turned, her smile frozen mid-sob. The color drained from her face. Ryan's jaw slackened, his hand slipping from her shoulder. I walked straight down the center aisle, my heels striking the stone path like hammer blows. My eyes never left theirs. When I reached the casket, I placed my hand gently on the polished wood and smiled. "I hear the service is beautiful," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the silence like a blade. Emily's cry tore through the air. High, raw, not grief this time but terror. "She's dead. She's supposed to be dead." Ryan staggered backward, his composure shattering. "This isn't possible." I turned to face the crowd, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." Gasps rippled like a wave through the audience. Then I looked back at my daughter, her phone clutched uselessly in her trembling hands. "Smile wider, Emily," I said softly, stepping closer. "This time, the whole world will see the truth." The air was electric, half the crowd frozen in disbelief, the other half fumbling for their own phones to record. And as I stood there, alive in the shadow of my own funeral, I saw it clearly in Emily's eyes. The mask was gone. No grief, no shame. Only raw fear. For the first time since Robert died, I felt powerful again. And this was only the beginning. Silence gripped the vineyard like a vice. The mourners froze in their seats, eyes darting between the casket, Emily's trembling hands, and me, very much alive, standing where the dead weren't supposed to stand. Ryan finally found his voice. This is some sick trick. His words stumbled over themselves. Sweat glistened at his temple despite the cool Napa breeze. Emily's mascara streaked down her cheeks, her sobs morphing into shrill panic. You're supposed to be gone, Mom. You're supposed to be buried. Cut her off. My voice was steady, sharp as glass. I suppose you thought the ocean would do the job for you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors clutched pearls. A family friend dropped her program onto the grass. That was when a new voice sliced through the tension. Smooth. Calculated. A man in an immaculate gray suit stepped from the far end of the terrace, adjusting his cufflinks with the kind of arrogance money buys. Enough of this spectacle, he said. His tone dripped authority. Mrs. Collins is clearly unstable. This performance only proves her decline. Daniel Price. The man behind the curtain. The butcher with a briefcase. I turned slowly, locking eyes with him. Ah. The puppeteer joins his show. He smiled shark-like. Margaret, grieving families shouldn't have to suffer through your delusions. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small recorder Ethan had given me. The red light blinked defiantly. Press play. Ryan's voice crackled to life. Doctors say stress can accelerate memory issues. We're documenting this for your safety. Emily's whisper followed. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. And then Ryan again. Sign the transfer, Margaret, and we all go home happy. The audience erupted in murmurs. Scandal electrifying the air. Daniel's mask slipped. His smile faltered for the first time. This proves nothing. Edited audio. Before he could finish, the whine of sirens cut across the vineyard. Blue and red lights danced against the rows of vines as black SUVs rolled up the gravel drive. FBI. A woman's voice thundered as agents swarmed the terrace, weapons drawn but steady. Everyone stay where you are. Emily let out a strangled scream. Ryan tried to run, but two agents pinned him before he reached the stairs. Daniel lifted his hands calmly, but his jaw clenched tight. I stepped forward, the sun casting me in full light, no longer a shadow or a ghost. You wanted me erased, Daniel, I said, my voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Instead, you just confessed in front of 50 witnesses, and on federal surveillance. Agent Ramirez, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, moved to my side. Mrs. Collins, you did exactly what we needed. We've been tracking Price's network for 2 years. But this is the nail in his coffin. Daniel's eyes burned into mine as the cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Emily sobbed, collapsing against the casket that was supposed to hold me. Ryan stared at the ground, pale as death itself. I lifted my chin, letting every guest, every neighbor, every so-called friend see me. Alive. Unbroken. Family tried to bury me, I said, my voice clear, steady, final. But I am done being the victim. Today, the grave they dug is their own. And as the FBI led them away, I felt the vineyard airshift. For the first time since Robert died, I wasn't the widow waiting for mercy. I was the storm that had come to collect. Asterisk. Months later, the vineyard was quiet again. No sirens, no gasps, no lies dressed in black silk. Just vines stretching under the sun, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. The trial became national news. Headlines screamed about the heiress who rose from the dead, and the estate acceleration conspiracy. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, cameras flashing as Emily, Ryan, and Daniel Price were led in, shackled, their designer clothes crumpled like paper crowns. Emily, the daughter I once held against my chest, sang to in the dark of night, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and attempted murder. 25 years without parole. The courtroom was filled with her sobs, but I felt nothing. The girl I loved had been gone long before the sentence. Ryan tried to fight, hiring the most expensive attorneys he could, but the recordings, the testimonies, the documents were ironclad. 20 years. His arrogance finally rotted into silence. And Daniel Price, polished, confident, the man who thought himself untouchable, received life without parole. The FBI dismantled his network piece by piece, exposing judges, doctors, accountants who had helped turn family dinners into funerals. 17 more arrests. Over 200 million traced back to stolen estates. Justice had teeth this time. And me. I was no longer the ghost of Margaret Collins. I was alive, legally and painfully alive. The courts restored my fortune, but I no longer cared for the numbers in a ledger. What mattered was the tiny life I cradled in my arms. Her name was Grace. The baby Emily and Ryan had tried to pass off as their heir was no blood of mine, but she became the heart I never knew I was missing. A newborn whose real mother, a runaway 17-year-old, had died in silence. I swore Grace would not. Standing before the judge on adoption day, I wore the same red dress I'd been pushed to my death in. Not as a victim, but as proof that fire doesn't always consume, it can also protect. I will raise her with the truth, I told the court. With love, not greed. With family, not bloodlines. With the legacy her real mother deserved. The gavel struck. Adoption approved. That night, I sat in Mrs. Wong's kitchen, the old lantern glowing soft amber, Ethan leaning against the counter, Tyler grinning shyly as he made faces at Grace. I wrote one last line in the notebook. They tried to bury me. Instead they planted me. And from that grave I rose, with a new life in my arms. Justice had been served. But more than that, life had been reclaimed. 5 years have passed. Grace is no longer a newborn swaddled in borrowed blankets. She's a curious little girl with wide brown eyes who asks too many questions and insists on holding my hand everywhere we go. And every night before bed, I tell her the truth. Not the fairy tale version, not the pretty lie. The truth, that her mother was a brave 17-year-old who wanted her to have a better life. That greed almost stole her story, but love saved it. I tell her that family is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the ones who pull you out of the ocean when you've been thrown in. Sometimes it's the woman who hands you soup in the middle of the night without asking questions. Sometimes it's the fireman who refuses to let you drown in silence. Blood betrayed me, but love rebuilt me. So here is the lesson I leave you with. Protect your heart but don't close it. Protect your assets but don't let them define you. And above all, when the world tells you you're finished, remember, you always have the choice to rise again. If you've watched this far, thank you. Truly. Tell me in the comments, what does family mean to you? Because your voice matters. And don't forget to subscribe. Because the story isn't over yet.